Sometimes people get carried away in conversation, meaning you might have asked someone a simple question, hoping to get a simple answer, and suddenly you're on a completely unrelated topic and you're not really sure how you got there in the first place. How did the conversation even get there? Well, that's the beauty and also the mystery of conversation. But that's less important than what you can do to get the conversation back on track so that you're not just jumping from topic to topic all over the place. The strategies that I am sharing in this lesson will be just as useful in casual conversation with friends and family as they will be in a business meeting or a professional setting. All right, so let's get right to it then. Validate and remind them of the topic that you're on or the question that you asked. So there are two parts to this first strategy. First, you validate the recent point that they made. And then you remind them gently, kindly, of the original topic of discussion. Or if you ask them a question, then that would be a good time to repeat the question or ask the question again in a different phrasing. For example, if you asked Fred if he would like to get dinner later, but he didn't answer that question, and he's talking instead about how much fun he had on a recent kayaking trip, then what can you say to Fred? Here's an example. Wow, Fred, I didn't know that you were an avid kayaker. That is really cool. We got a bit off track, but are you around for dinner this evening? It would be great to catch up over some food. So in the beginning of that answer, you validated his love for kayaking and how cool it is that he does it, but then you gently nudged him in the right direction of the question that you asked and asked him if he had any dinner plans. All right, now let's look at another example, and that does not involve a question, because it's not always about a question. So let's say that you are in the middle of a business meeting and the topic discussion, what you're supposed to be talking about, is the new product rollout. Suddenly, instead of talking about that, the participants start talking about the new remote work policies at the company, and the conversation gets off track. So let's see how we can validate and then gently, kindly remind them of the original talking point. Let's see what that looks like. All right. So in this context, as you know, it's not a question, but you're getting them back onto the subject. You could say something like, your concerns about the remote work policies are valid, and we should definitely revisit this topic at our next all-staff meeting. However, the reason this meeting was called was to discuss the new product launch. So if we can get back on that topic, that would be great. You can also end with, that would be much appreciated. All right, so that is the first strategy. And as you can see, it's not just for a question that you want to ask again, but also to remind them of the topic that you are originally, supposed to be discussing. All right, the second strategy is transition, relevance, place. I know it sounds like a mouthful, but the transition, relevance, place, or TRP, is a moment in the conversation where you can jump in and you can interrupt. So this could be a pause. It could be a moment of silence, long or short. It could be at the end of a sentence when it's clearly the end of a sentence. It could also be where there's a falling intonation. As you may notice, being on the lookout for a TRP, transition, relevance, place, requires active listening and participation on your part. It's not the time to be dozing off, right? You need to be attuned and paying attention to the tonality, the pacing, and the logical direction of the conversation, even if it is off topic. So when you do find a moment to jump into the conversation because you're now at a TRP, what can you say? So let's now look at a few phrases that you can use to make your point and add to the conversation. You might want to elaborate or expand or clarify. So that's where you can jump in. All right. Absolutely. And guess what else? And then you go on to say something. So absolutely. And guess what else? A quick point on that note. And then you jump into what you want to say. And the last one is, before you go, I'd like to say, ... Right. So these can also be used to interrupt someone who might be hogging the conversation and just taking up way too much airtime, just talking way too much. We all have encountered those people. But you really want to keep in mind here that both of these strategies that we've shared today require active listening. It's really important to be engaged in the conversation, even if you're not on the lookout for a moment that you can interrupt. It's just good conversation practice. And if you're using the first strategy, be sure to validate the first point before helping steer the conversation back on track. And really, as you notice, probably the only way that you can validate what the person is saying is if you've been listening to what they're saying. And then, and only then, can you steer the conversation back in the direction it was going, either through asking the question again or reminding the person gently about the original topic of discussion. It's really important to validate first, because if you jump right into steering the conversation back on track without validating what they've just been saying, then it could come off as a little rude and as if you didn't really care about what they were saying. It just feels a little bit heartless. And so we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're being kind and thoughtful communicators, but also being assertive. And so that's the reason why I really encourage you to first validate, because that is such a powerful communication strategy in really many communication contexts. So this also goes for when you might be having a heated argument with someone. But that's not the topic of today's conversation. The point here is that you do want to make sure that you validate, especially in this setting of trying to get the conversation back on track, and in which case you might have to interrupt as well. And in the second strategy, you also need to be an engaged listener and active communication participant, because you have to listen for the right opportunity in the conversation that you can enter and interrupt in a way that's not really rude or thoughtless, right? Because you're not interrupting the person per se, because you're not overlapping with their speech, but you might be interrupting their train of thought if it's at a moment where it's a pause, but they might have wanted to continue. And this could be for several reasons that you interrupt, right? Maybe the person is speaking too much and not letting you or anyone else in the conversation talk. Maybe the conversation is way off topic. And the other reason could be is that maybe you would like to add to the conversation and get a chance to speak, because that's kind of the point of having a conversation, right? Everyone gets a chance to talk. Whatever the reason, both of these strategies will help you achieve these outcomes. Sometimes we have to fight for floor space, meaning being able to add to a conversation, right? We have to be alert and we have to be ready to jump into the conversation at any given moment. So make sure that you have in the back of your mind something that you would like to add. These strategies are going to help you become more attuned to the patterns of conversation. And if things were to get off topic, you will know exactly how to bring it back. I encourage you to practice these strategies, and the next time you find yourself in a conversation, you'll know what to do if you want to interrupt and get the conversation back on track. And the reality is, the more you practice these, the more second nature these strategies will become. So be sure to practice, practice, practice. All right, that is all from me today. I hope that you really enjoyed this lesson. Let me know about a time where you feel like you wanted to add to the conversation, but you didn't get a chance to because you weren't really sure how to interrupt. You didn't really want to talk over someone. Also, share with me which of these strategies you liked the best. I will see you in the next advanced English lesson where we're going to continue advancing your English. Until then, keep up the awesome work, and I will see you then. Bye for now.